Hey, good morning to you. This is Oz on Smash Bros. Radio, the only digital award winning radio station in Jefferson County, Birmingham. Hey, what's going on? It's Monday, 17th. Month about going over with, ain't it? Hey, we appreciate you. If you have not done so, please go and follow, share, and all that other good stuff. Tell your relatives, tell your friends, tell your associates, tell those folks you don't give a happy whatever about. Please go to Smash Bros. Radio, like, share, follow on YouTube, on Instagram, as well as Facebook. We appreciate you. I'm Oz. Also, if you don't mind, do likewise when it comes to me. You can find me practically everywhere. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Twitter and Facebook. Smash Bros, of course, as well as Instagram. We appreciate you. There is a lot going on. Uh, Pre COVID and post COVID has pretty much changed the whole scenario, has changed the whole scenery. And in the coming week, we're going to discuss the changes that COVID has started. Uh, we know that there is no longer a norm, that we are creating a new norm. Some of the old norms will transfer over, but in all actuality, uh, we're going into a different season. We're going into a different way of looking, examining, modifying things how we used to do. And so that's going to be one of the things that we're going to talk back in the upcoming weeks. One thing I want to mention, though, if you do not know, Bethel Inslee Action Task Incorporated, better known as BEAT, BEAT, is having a fundraiser. And you can get in touch with Tara Dorsey, who is executive director of BEAT, BEAT. You can contact her at the office at 205 780 4397, 205 780 4397, or you can contact her direct at 205 381 6032, or you can email her at tora.dorsey at beatfields.org. So we hope that if you're looking for an organization that has receipts, that has the history of giving back to the community, BEAT is the organization. It has been around for over 30 years. And we're going to talk about the organization and hopefully connecting a lot of individuals together. There are some individuals that I have taken the liberty and I have given your number out to Tara, and she will be contacting you. But please look up Beat, BEAT, Beat. The where are you? Where are you? The Bethel Inslee Action Task Incorporated. Bethel Inslee Action Task Incorporated, BEAT, Beat. So please, it's a fantastic organization to join. It's a fantastic organization to be affiliated with, to be associated with. And so please, all Greeks, non Greeks, businesses, profits, nonprofits, individuals, institutions, organizations, please get in touch with Tara Dorsey. Also, she is planning a voter registration drive. We have to the 24th. It can be done. There are individuals, there are organizations, Greeks and non Greeks, that have had voters registration. It can be done. You have the expertise, you have the receipts, you have the know how on how to formulate and how to come together to have this major voter registration. It is most needed now when you consider what we have to look forward to or not to look forward to. If you took the time to watch the debate between Senator Warnock and Herschel Walker, that in itself should scare you to death. And that's what the Republicans are having as candidates. They're using these individuals as puppets. It was a tragedy to watch a star in his own right at one time to be this vegetable on stage. When the Republican Party has been honest, blatantly honest, and has told us exactly what they're coming for, that should scare you. When someone has told you that they're coming after Social Security and they're going to privatize it, when they say that they're going to do away with Medicaid and they're going to do away with all these social programs, that should scare you to death. Now, we have those of us on Social Security and SSI, we have a increase coming up, but what you do not know and what your Congress has passed, that if with this raise, it's going to put some of us in a higher tax bracket. And because of being put into a higher tax bracket, there's a possibility that you're going to have to pay taxes on your Social Security. That's right. Let me state that one more time. Because of the raise that we're going to have, most of us, some of us, are going to have at least $140 added to our check, depending on the individual. Depending on the individual. So not all of us are going to get the maximum or whatever 140. It depends on the individual, what you put into the trust fund, because that's what Social Security is. Social Security is a trust fund. So when the Republican Party has come out and they're saying that they're going to do away with Social Security, then that should scare you into knowing exactly that you need to get up and you need to vote. You need to make sure that you make yourself visible and available for those individuals who cannot, who do not have transportation, so that way you can provide transportation to them. So please, all organizations, Greeks, non-Greeks, profits, nonprofits, institutions, Masonic order, radio stations, TV stations, everyone, we need one huge voter registration drive before the 24th. And it can be done. It has been done. It is most paramount that we counteract what the Republican Party is trying to do. And then if you are a native, if you live here in Alabama, there's a case that is before the Supreme Court, because there's 27% black population. They should have at least 2 black districts, congressional districts. The Republican Party does not want to have a second district. They do not want to revamp. That's one reason why Alabama is a red state, is because of gerrymandering. That's why a majority of the states are red states, because of gerrymandering. And if you do not know what gerrymandering is, you need to Google it. And see, that's one thing that's infuriating, in that you have search engines in which you can rarely find the information. Or if you have a smart, let me show you. Let me show you. Watch this. Serious, what is gerrymandering?
Here's what I found.
It puts it straight up. Gerrymandering. In representative democracy, gerrymandering is the political manipulation of electoral district boundaries with the intent of creating undue advantage for a party group or social economic class within the constituency. Very quickly, there is no reason for us to be dummied down when you have the information. Gerrymandering is the manipulation of electoral boundaries to favor certain electoral outcomes. And that is what is happening. That is what is happening. It is alleged, and I use that term loosely, it is alleged that when Earl Hilliard, before he was elected to Congress, there was a meeting between Uncle Joe Reed and the Republican Party, and he wanted a black congressional district, which is rightfully true, and so the Republican Party agreed to it with some stipulations. So that's why you have the 7th congressional district. But these counties, these maps should be redrawn to the advantage of everyone. There should be an equal playing field, and it is not. So that's why it is most paramount. That's why it is most important that in this election coming up, that everyone is available and viable when it comes to voting. And that's why it is a necessity for us to have this voter registration drive in a mass. Everyone should come together. Everyone should come together as one huge body to have this voter registration drive. Again, you can get in touch with Tara Dorsey at 205-780-4397, 205-780-4397, or you can call direct 205-381-6032, 205-381-6032. Tara Dorsey is the executive director of BEAT, B-E-A-T, which is Bethel Inslee Action Task Incorporated. It can be done. It can be done. Please, I beg of you, to come together as one body and to have this one huge, massive voter registration drive. We can do it. I have all the faith in Birmingham that we can do this and be successful at it. This is a time now to where we need to come up with a plan on how to get the voters out, where the transportation is going to be, who is going to provide the transportation, and make sure that they know the precinct and the voting where they need to go to vote. You need to make sure what the requirements are so that way there is no hiccup once you go voting. So please, I beg of you, this is most necessity that we come together as one body and we make sure that we have everyone who is eligible to vote can vote. So please, 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 please. So over the weekend, a very special individual passed away. And it brought back a lot of memories. Memories that I wish I could forget of when my grandmother passed away. Because of family dynamics, when a parent becomes sick, you would think that it would be a joint group coming together to take care of a parent. But unfortunately, that isn't necessarily true in most cases. Usually, when you have a caregiver, most of the time the caregiver is the weakest of the siblings. And that weakest of the siblings becomes the strongest of the siblings. So I like to dedicate this program to this parent who was one of my best supporters. Again, I have been divinely blessed while teaching that I have parents who supported me. And without their assistance, I would not have been the teacher that I became. So this parent was always there, always had my back. And because she put up a good fight, she transitioned over. And like I said, it brought some memories back when my grandmother was sick. Uh, there are three. My grandmother and my grandparents had three children. My mom, who is the eldest, my uncle, and then my aunt. So when my grandmother started having signs of dementia, uh, it weighed heavy on everyone. And so at one time she was in a nursing home, and we just couldn't handle that. So uh, my aunt decided that her and my grandmother would get a house, and my grandmother that I call Gam or Mama would come. And so I think that uh, extended my grandmother's life because of being around individuals that loved her and supported her and was there for her. Eventually, it came to a time to where uh, she was in much more need of care, much more need of observation, and so caregiving uh, was given to my aunt, which I had a problem with. Uh, my mom was 16 years old when she had me. My dad was 19 years old. So when I came home from the hospital, professional centers in Montgomery, I was placed in my granddaddy's arms uh, because he had just had back surgery. And so I stayed in his arms while he recuperated. So uh, I had to back up because I used to tell folks I was raised by my grandparents, and that the way that it sounded was that my parents were not involved. But back then, um, you lived, you had an extended family, so most of my life was raised in my grandparents' house. And because of being raised in my grandmother's house, grandparents' house, they were the ones in charge. So my parents were there, uh, along with my grandparents. So my parents were there to help with my upbringing, or my grandparents were there with my upbringing. And so there was a close connection because of me being the eldest of the grandchildren. So my grandmother did not have a favorite grandchild. The grandchild or the grandchildren that were around her were her favorites during that time. But she knew that there were some grandchildren that needed more attention than others. I was one of the ones that did not need that much attention, and I understood uh, my place. And as I have mentioned many times before, I was raised in a family that you knew your place, you stayed in your place, you accepted your place. And that's how I am now. I have no problem with my place. I stay in my place. I accept my place, my lane. So there were certain requirements because of me being the eldest of the grandchildren. And I had no problems with that. Back then, you didn't question. You did because it was required of you. And then because the elders asked you to do it, really, there was no asking. They told you to do it. It was an expectation. See, back then, we knew our boundaries. We were given boundaries. And though my mom was 16 years old when she had me, it was always understood my mom was not my friend. My mom was my mom. Now, we had a close relationship, but I knew my place. I knew my mom was my mom. She was not my best friend. She would never be my best friend. And my mom let me know not to forget my place. And I never did forget my place. My uncle, well, that's a sore topic because to be blunt and to be without any remorse, I have a problem with my uncle. I have no respect for my uncle. Uh, my uncle was placed on a pedestal by his sisters, my mother and my aunt. Uh, I don't hold him in such high esteem. Uh, you are the only son, but yet you did not step up to the plate to help your sister with your mother. Now, and you see, this is another time where I had to remember my place because with me being the eldest, my aunt is 5 years older than I am. So though I was the eldest grandson, I was too similar to being the baby, the youngest, because I was raised with my uncle and my aunt. So my grandmother looked at me as another son and not a grandson, which my mom had concern with. And so everything was left for my aunt to do uh, because of the dementia developing. Uh, my aunt was having concerns with the medication that my grandmother was on because she was on over 15 plus pills. She had a doctor, Dr. Thigpen in Montgomery, who she had had for a doctor for many years. But he was an old, decrepit doctor that never did pay attention to my aunt. And I always listened to my grandmother. And so instead of examining my grandmother, he would just give more pills. And so when my aunt told me that the doctor never listened to her, nor would he answer any questions, I was attending Alabama State. I have a double degree. I have a bachelor's of science in secondary education in social sciences, and then I have a bachelor's of art in social work. So Dr. Jerry Yeoman was my social work professor. So I asked Dr. Yeoman about the condition, and she was saying that a new field of medicine had just developed, has been around a while, but not as old as the others, and it was called genetology. So we took my grandmother to the genetologist, and she brought my aunt, took all my grandmother's medications. She sat down with Dr. Bolden. He asked all these questions, and he looked through the pills. And so by the time the consultation ended, he had pretty much subtracted between 10 and 12 medications that was counteracting. And my grandmother's system is very peculiar, but my aunt was so aware that she knew exactly what medication was what, that and sometimes she would have the medication. So because of going to Dr. Bolden, and then see, that's another thing that I recommend and suggest, that if you are over 60, if you have parents that are over 60 going into the 70s, it might be to your advantage that you find you a genetologist that handles old people or elders, because they have the science of understanding the body of an elder. And it's a specialist. And when you reach a certain point, most of us should be going to a genetologist because they are more aware of the symptoms that affect us as we get up older. So my aunt became the caregiver. If you've never been a caregiver, you cannot imagine the pressure, the stress, the demands that it puts on a body, that puts on a soul. It's mentally, physically exhausting. And sometimes it can be spiritually exhausting because you are watching an individual that has always been there, that has always been vibrant, been active. My grandmother was extremely active. My grandmother was in White Shrine as well as Eastern Star. She was past past worthy matron. I used to help my grandmother set up the Elizabeth Armstrong Chapter 10, Elizabeth, was it Eastern Star chapter. I know the positions. I don't know what goes on in the meetings, of course, because it's a secret meeting, it's a secret organization. But I helped my grandmother uh, set up for the meetings. I remember going, and there was two. The carpet or the rug was divided in two, and it had the five-pointed star, and in the center was the altar where the Bible was laid. I used to know the different colors, what the different colors were of the stars, because I think if I remember correctly, you have white, you have yellow, you have green, you have red, and I think you have blue. And each one of those star points represent a woman of the Bible. I think the yellow represents Ruth, and that's the only one I know. But there's 5 points, and each color represents or stands for a woman in the Bible. Uh, I know the positions of the worthy matron, uh, worthy patrons always in the east, the associates always in the west. Then you have the different positions. When my grandmother became worthy matron, each one of the star points, the woman that represented that color, her gown was that color. So if you were yellow, you had a yellow gown, white gown, blue gown, red gown. It all represented the color of the star points. So when you have a grandmother who was always vibrant, she was a favorite of the nieces and nephews, or she was a favorite of the family. She was the glue that brought everybody together. And again, uh, we knew our place. We knew what we were required to do, and we never questioned it because she had that much respect and hold on her family. So for my aunt to become the caregiver, my aunt took on a huge responsibility. Uh, I think that it was the first time, maybe the second time, that I came close to uh, being disrespectful to my mom. My mom lived in Foley, down there around Gulf Shores, and so Mama would go up to Marion County to visit her sister-in-law, which meant that you would have to go past Montgomery. And so Mama was always upset that that I forgot who my mother was because my grandmother allowed me to do certain things that my mother wouldn't allow me to do. One in particular, you sit on a couch, you lay on a bed. You do not sit on your bed and you do not lay on the couch. Well, my grandmother allowed me to lay on the couch. She allowed me to sit on the bed. Now, when Mama came home, or when Mama came to my grandmother's place, I knew not to lay on the couch, and I knew not to sit on the bed. And so there was one time that I had to let my mom know that, listen, I know who Evelyn is. Evelyn is my grandmother. I know who Eva is. Eva is my mama. But if my grandmother wants to give me some things, I'm going to take them. Because see, Mama's opinion was that, well, she's the eldest, and she's to get it before me, and then she would give it to me. And I understood that. But at the same time, if my grandmother wanted to give me something, I was going to take it. So I had asked my mom how come she didn't stop by Montgomery to give Deborah, my aunt, some type of time to catch her breath. She says she didn't have time. I said, well, then how come you can't stop by on your way back to Foley over the weekend and at least give Deborah Saturday and Sunday, and then you can leave out Monday? And so I think that was the first time that I told my mom, you're always throwing up to me, that you just remember you're the grandchild and not the child. And so I did not mean to say it in the way that I did, but I told Mama, I said, well, if I'm the grandchild, then why am I doing the child's work? Why am I doing your job when you don't even stop over in Montgomery to give your sister time to catch a breather? I think that's very selfish on your part. So when my mom gave me that mom look, I knew that had overstepped my bounds. And I went back to my place. When I was in therapy, the therapist told me that when it comes to family dynamics, that as the eldest of the grandchildren, I need to remember that I am the grandchild. That when there comes any type of disagreements or issues or conflicts or whatever between my mom, her sister, and her brother, that has nothing to do with me. That's none of my business. And I remember that. So I knew that Deborah was going to have to stand up, but Deborah wasn't the type to stand up. And she did what was required or what was expected out of her. I have no respect for my uncle because for him to have the audacity, and if Deborah accepted it, that's cool. But for my uncle to go to my aunt and tell her finally that he appreciated that what she did for mother, that he couldn't do it, I think was stupid, and I lost all respect for him because as a child, Deborah did not ask to be the caregiver. It was technically thrown on her, so she had no other choice. But because she knew her place, but because she knew the responsibility of taking care of her mother, she did it. She did not do it reluctantly. She did it with favor. She did it with purity. And she looked after my grandmother. My aunt was so good at looking after my grandmother that you could not replace her. I had one time had wanted to have a individual to come in because I was working. My mom could afford it. My uncle's retired from the military. He was in the Air Force Reserve. So all of us had money that we could come together and uh, share the expense of having a someone to come in. See, my grandmother usually got up at 8 o'clock. My aunt got up around 6 o'clock to prepare because she was a manager over at Trade Tree, I think it was, and she had everything laid out. Now it got to the point to where Mama had to. We could not allow Mama to cook anymore because she did not have the understanding that the fryer was hot or anything like that. So my aunt would place all the breakfast stuff out for her, as well as her pills. And while she was getting ready, she was also prepping for my grandmother to get ready too. So see, once Mama got up, walking around, she went and had her breakfast, and then as soon as she got into her lazy boy chair, she stayed in her chair till around 12. So there was a routine. But for my aunt to be the caregiver without any type of assistance, you cannot imagine the stress, the pressure that was put on her. And then you have to understand the family dynamics because while these individuals are not stepping up to the plate to help their sibling take care of their relative, to take care of their parent, then if something should happen, then those same individuals are the first ones to blame the caregiver for what had transpired or what had happened, which is not fair. See, I do not like confrontation, but I'm not going to run from it either. But I had to understand that that was none of my business. That if Deborah had to handle her sister and her brother. But if you're not a caregiver, you cannot understand the pressure, the demands that is put on you, the worry, the questions. Because see, you get to a point to where it's going to affect you to the point to where you start having these bad thoughts that will maybe, and you stop because now you feel guilty. Why am I thinking that if she just goes to sleep, then why? It's normal. It's normal. You can't plan for death. There's no way. You think that you are plan, but you cannot plan for death. You know that eventually it's going to happen. You don't know when, but you see that this loved one, the one that has always had your back, the one that gave you a backbone, the one that pushed you and motivated you and just praised you. Now you see this individual needs your care, and it drains you, and it hurts so bad. And you wonder, am I doing enough to make her life as enjoyable as possible? You get to the point to where you really don't want to leave because you don't know about what if. Now, what if I should go down to the country and this should happen? What ifs really kicks you behind because they're flooding you, because you have taken on this responsibility readily to where you stop having a life of your own. Your life becomes taking care of your mother or your dad or an aunt or a grandmother. Family dynamics play an important part in how smoothly everything is run in that family. And you're always going to have those individuals who are always going to say, "Well, I don't have time because you know that I work and my children are in all these activities. I don't really give a happy goddamn about your family because all of us are working, all of us are taking care of our family, but yet it is your responsibility now to help me to help the family take care of your mother or your aunt or your uncle or a relative in your family. You aren't any better than anybody else. Your life isn't as important as what you think it is. In your head, it might be better, but in the bigger picture, you don't want the responsibility. You don't want to do it. That's what it really comes down to. You don't want the responsibility. You want the responsibility on somebody else so that way you can dictate. And you have no right to dictate shit, especially if you're not giving. Now, I think that during that time, if I remember correctly, after adding what a individual coming in, because we would need somebody from, let's say, from 12 to 2, or let's say 11 to 2. So you have 11, 12, 1, 2. So you have an individual, let's say 4 hours. So you have an individual come in for 4 hours because all we needed to do was make sure that the lunch was placed out, that that Mama was secure and safe. And then, because Deborah usually came home between 2 and 3. So, and then once after 2 and 3, Mama would be back in her lazy boy chair that raised up. And she would stay there until Deborah came home around 5. So, all we would need is somebody for 4 hours. 12, 1, was it 1, 12, 11, 10. So 10 to 2. 10, 11, 12, 1, 2. 10 to 2. And it would be very easy because all you would have to do is just sit there and just chit chat or whatever. You didn't have to do any cleaning, just sit there. And I think that after we added everything up, I think that all of us would have to put in like 150. And people didn't want to do that. But you always have in the family those individuals who think that their lives are more important than anybody else's, that their lives are too busy to take care of someone, which your life isn't any busier than anybody else's life. You just a selfish son of a bitch. That's all you are. You're very selfish. And usually these individuals are the most venomous when it comes to their words because they have this arrogant, pompous peacock mentality that, well, I just don't have time. But yet, when something happens, oh well, you should have done this. Well, bitch, you should have got up and did it yourself. If you felt that if this should have been done, then you should have taken the initiative to do it yourself. But usually, the caregiver is an individual of a pure spirit that does not like confrontation. So not only are they dealing with the stress and the pressure of taking care of their loved ones, but now they're having to put up with bullshit from individuals who are self centered. Then you have individuals in the family who pop by just to see what you're doing so that way they can go back and tell everybody else what you're not doing. People have to understand that an individual has a different relationship with every member of their family. I was raised the majority of the time in my grandparents' house. And there was a time where, when I was at school, that I lived with my grandmother while I was over at Alabama State University. So I had that dynamic. I had that relationship with her. I went through the change with my grandmother, which was a horrifying experience. If you've never been through the change with someone in your family, trust me, it will change your perspective immediately. So with having been through the trials and tribulations of going through the changes with my grandmother, I had a different relationship than anybody else in the family. I was allowed, understand this, I was allowed to say certain things that other people could not say. And then when the elders of the family, because see, I would go to Montgomery every other weekend to give my aunt a break. So I would come in after coming from school, and I would be somewhat exhausted, somewhat tired, because that's about an hour and a half drive from Birmingham to Montgomery, depending on the traffic and how well my feet stuck to the pedal. But usually an hour and a half. So I would come in, my grandmother would be in her lounge chair, and she would ask all these questions. And I would say, oh, hold up, Evelyn, hold up. Let me put these in my room. Let me wash my face. Let me wash my hands. Let me get myself together. Do you need something to drink? And then once I get you something to drink, and once I get me something to drink and I sit down, then you can bombard me with all these questions. Now, see, the older members of the family thought I was being disrespectful to my grandmother. And they, unfortunately, let me know that they felt that it was being disrespectful. And I had to let them know that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. So stay in your place, mind your own business, because I will never, ever disrespect my grandmother. Now, I had to call my mom to let my mom know what I had done. Because, see, they would have called Eva and told Eva that I was being disrespectful to them, and my mom don't play. So, see, I learned early in life that it's easier for me to go ahead and tell on myself before somebody else told on me, so that way it wouldn't be so bad for me. So, when it comes to being a caregiver, you have to understand there is a lot of things going on simultaneously. Then it comes a time to where you know that the end is about, and you want to be selfish, and you want them to stay. But at the same time, you know that they're ready, but they don't want to go because they know that they know you don't want them to. So you have to have the Constitution. You have to have the ability to know that it's time for me to let go. it's time for me to let you go. I was taking AP classes at the University of Alabama. And if you don't know, you have a week of being trained to teach AP classes. So I had two classes to take because I had already put in the matrix because I was department chair. I had already put it in the matrix for the incoming year, AP government and AP economics. So my matrix was set. There was nothing I could not change that. It was set. It was already planned. It was already arranged. Classes were made. So it was it was a necessity that I had to take these classes because nobody else wanted them. And see, I did not want to teach AP classes because I thought I couldn't handle the smart kids. So I was up. I'd already chosen the book that I was going to use for government and economics. I had looked on the website for college. What is it? College prep, I think it was, and I already done my syllabus. So my sister called and said that uh, memo. And she explained the situation that the doctor had come in. Everybody was around the bed, and he was asking, "Has she seen everybody?" And in unison, everybody said, "No, she hadn't seen Lewis." And he said that, well, that's one reason why she's refusing to leave because she needs to see Lewis. So I was called, and that was on a Thursday. Now on Fridays, you turn in your syllabus, you turn in your book. Professor looks over it during lunch, and then he lets you know after you come back from lunch before you leave whether or not you've been approved to teach AP classes. Well, I talked to Dr. Kelly, told Dr. Kelly about the situation, and she was saying, "Well, you have to go." I said, "But my," and I explained the situation about the matrix and all. She said, "Well, go talk to the professor." So I did. So I handed the professor the book and the syllabus, and he was saying that, "Well, why are you here?" I said, "Because I need to be certified." He said, "Well, you already had your syllabus is good." He said, "Well, you need to go." I said, "Well, I get my certificate." He said, "Yeah," and he gave me the certificate, and I left. So I went down to Montgomery, walked in the room. Everybody was around the bed. Then the next thing I knew, everybody had left, and I didn't know when they left. So I was in the room with my grandmama. God knows I was not ready. I was not ready to say goodbye. But something in me told me she's tired and she wants to go. So I took a deep breath. I held her hand in mine and I patted her hand and told her, "You gave me everything I needed to be what I am. And I thank you for being there for me. And even though I don't want you to go, I know that you're tired. Know that I'm going to be all right. And you're going to be missed. But it's time for you to go to sleep." She squeezed my hand and she went to sleep. She transitioned. The next thing I know, everyone was back in the room. And I don't know when they came back, but you comes a time as a caregiver that you start having these thoughts that, well, maybe it would be best, and then you start feeling guilty. That's normal. That's normal. You're not being evil. You're not being malicious. You're being honest because you can't see. You cannot stand to see this beautiful person that has always been a part of your life, who's always added to your life, has given to your life, cannot be there, but that's normal. So, being a caregiver is a special, terrifying position to be, especially when you're the only one and you have no support in your family. But know that eventually people will see how much you did, how hard you worked, and the time and the energy that you put in to make sure that that individual had the most wonderful life in their latter days. And know that you are valued, know that you are loved and cherished, and know that the individual that you took care of appreciated you tremendously. Because everybody can't. You know, some people were saying that, well, you shouldn't hold people so, you shouldn't be so demanding. Well, maybe I shouldn't. But when I know that there are three individuals who can take care of an individual who's always been there, I can be hard. Because even though I'm the grandchild, I took a child's place readily, willingly, because my grandmother was my backbone. My grandmother was the one that taught me how to stand up, how to speak out. See, when I was being raised, I was like a whoop puppy. I always stayed in the corner because of things that had transpired. But once I went back to live with my grandparents, my grandmother gave me a backbone. I no longer stayed in the corner. I was more out. Now my cousins were always there protecting me, as well as my friends. But my grandmother gave me the courage, gave me the backbone, gave me the motivation and the determination to go through college, to get my master's. It was because of my grandmother that I am the gardener that I am now, that my yard looks as well as it does now. Now, you would think that I wouldn't want to do gardening because that was my punishment. But my grandmother gave me life. So I can empathize with Kathy, with what she went through, because her mother was the most precious individual in the world. Most precious. And my heart goes out to her family because I know that you took care of your mama in the most spectacular way. So now she's transitioned over. She's better. She's at peace. And that's how it's supposed to be. So if you have someone who is a caregiver in your family, please, please take the time to let them know how much you appreciate them. Please at least give them one day or at least 2 hours to catch their breath. And if you can, you need to come together as a family and possibly have someone to come in at least for 2 or 3 hours to give that caregiver a time to catch your breath. And if you come together as a family, you'll find out that it doesn't cost that much. And most times, if you check to see if Medicaid or Medicare, there's a possibility that they will pay for it. But being a caregiver is a position that no one wants, but is a necessity. So, again, if you have someone who is a caregiver, let that individual know how much you appreciate them, cherish them, give them at least 2 or 3 hours or even a weekend come together as a family, bringing somebody in. And if you are a caregiver, know that you are valued, you are admired. And we understand and empathize exactly what you're going through. But know that everything that you're going through is normal. And you are a special individual. And if you haven't been told, you are wonderfully loved and admired. So that's it. I appreciate everybody stopping in. I'm sorry to talk about something so morbid, but it's something that needed to be explained and need to be talked about. We need to understand exactly what this pre and post COVID has done to us, how it has amplified some things, how it has diminished some things. So I appreciate you. Appreciate you tuning in, connecting with Smash Bros Radio. Again, please go like, share, follow Smash Bros Radio on YouTube, Facebook, as well as Instagram. I'm OZZz. You can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. So we appreciate you. Appreciate you stopping and know your value, know your worth. Know that you are the only obstacle in your life and that you can achieve anything and everything that you want. And most importantly, you know that I love you more than I love my luggage. I'll see you tomorrow. Y'all be safe. The live stream on the show. On the show. The live stream. On the show. On the show. On the show. The live stream. The live stream on the show.